Dear students, yesterday we had a discussion on the concept of equality, the liberal perspective. How liberal perspective viewed the concept of equality. Today we are going to have a discussion on, the liberty Marxist perspective. How we should look at the concept of equality from Marxist perspective. uh, when we discussed liberty from the point of view of Marxist perspective, we had a discussion on the difference between liberal perspective and Marxist perspective. How we looked at the concept of liberty from liberal perspective, where you learned that liberal perspective looks at the liberty from the point of view of an individual oriented thinking, how an individual should be given liberty so that his potentialities would be realized. So it was a liberal concept of liberty, was a concept that focuses on individual and his liberty. And liberal perspective looks at the society as the mechanical uh, combination or mechanical combination of the individuals. So when an individual is given liberty, he will develop into a full human being. And entirely in Marxist perspective, which was entirely different from the liberal perspective, views liberty as something, uh, it is a freedom from uh, freedom from debilitating socio economic and political conditions. Until and unless capitalism is abolished, a man cannot realize his true freedom. That is what we learned about liberty from Marxist perspective. And today we are going to have a discussion on the concept of equality from Marxist perspective. Before that, yesterday we had a discussion on equality and liberal perspective, and we should go through uh, the all PPTs that we used, or the headings that were used in PPTs. We should once again look at that before going to have a discussion on equality from Marxist perspective. Let us go through the yesterday's slides, which described how liberal perspective is towards the concept of equality. We had a discussion how in a traditional and ancient period, liberty, equality is seen as quite common, and inequality is quite common in those days, especially in traditional and ancient period. And how the modern technology, how the modern period that began with the Renaissance movement in Italy changed the perception towards inequality. And the technology which brought about so many changes by understanding the natural laws or the laws behind the nature, and how so many inventions came into being, and how those inventions changed the human perception of looking at the nature. And that modernity and technology brought about change in the perception of human beings towards equality. And it is the modern era's optimism and belief that all are created equal. And we also had a discussion on what or how different philosophers of the modern age, 16th and 17th, 18th century, different philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, and Immanuel Kant. The first three philosophers, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, are treated as contractual philosophers. The theory of contract theory of origin of state, how they perceived human beings in the state of nature, and how human beings enjoyed liberty and equality in the state of nature, and they created the state by entering into contract among themselves. Thomas Hobbes was for absolute sovereignty, and John Locke was limited government. Rousseau was for equality or general will, how the authority should be under the control of a body which is after the common good. That is what Rousseau said. Immanuel Kant emphasized on moral worth of every individual, how human beings are equal in the from the point of view of morality. So that is how they viewed equality. Human beings were all equal, and they were born equal, and they enjoy some natural rights equally. That is how they brought in the concept of equality onto the stage of onto the world stage. And uh, uh, this is we had yesterday, how in spite of differences in physical powers and mental faculties, all are equal in ability and equal in being able to attain the ends they aspire for. This is how we looked at equality from these great philosophers. uh, and how the contemporary thinkers like you know F.A. Hayek, Milton Friedman, and Robert Nozick, how they emphasized on market economy, how they emphasized on capitalism. They strongly believed that market economy and capitalism are based on human freedom. When human being is given freedom, then he will develop. Not they don't believe that welfare state would create necessary conditions for a human being to have equality, to bring about equality. They did not believe in welfare state concept. They believed in market economy and capitalism. They thought market economy would provide proper conditions for every human being to enjoy his liberty, and they did not believe in equality, because they thought that when this capitalism and market economy is allowed to function, is allowed to have a say in the allocation of the resources, then the wealth that is created would one day lead to or percolate down to all the human beings, and inequality will not become an issue. That is what they thought. They believed strongly in capitalism and market economy. That is how they thought, when property and wealth is created, that would automatically percolate down to all the human beings, and inequality wouldn't be an issue. This is how they viewed contemporary liberal thinkers. Now let us have a discussion on equality from the perspective of Marxism. No equality and Marxist perspective. Uh, Before going to have Marxist perspective about equality, because Marxism or socialism, socialist thinking and Marxist thinking strongly believe in equality. They give more importance to equality rather than liberty. Liberty is an individual orientation, is an individual oriented concept, and equality is about society at large. When you provide all the socio-economic conditions to every human being or all the human being, when equality is brought in, then automatically, and they strongly believed that when private property and capitalism is abolished, and equality is achieved, only that equality is the real equality. That is what they believed in, and that is why they give they give a lot of importance to equality. And the two famous thinkers, Frederick Engels and Karl Marx. Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx. Uh, these two were the great philosophers of Marxism or communism. The the type of social organization that is sought to be established through, proletariat revolution is communism. And Friedrich Engels and uh, uh, they criticized the capitalism. Liberal conviction just now have said how liberals believe in market economy and capitalism, where wealth would be created, and the immense wealth that is created would percolate down to all the human beings, and inequality would not become an issue. Inequality arises with the institution of private property. The Angels and Marx believed that as long as there is capitalism and private property, the equality cannot be achieved. And they criticized capitalism, how in capitalism, everything becomes, economical, everything becomes, mechanical. Human relations become mechanical, and work, especially the work in the factories or in the industries, work becomes so divided, and it loses its, the its capacity to realize, to bring about a realization in the human being. And work loses its, the inner spirit, because people work for the sake of, production, and that production, takes place because just to give lot of profit to the capitalist class. And when a worker works for the sake of work, instead of working to realize his life or to enjoy his work, then the work becomes, nightmare. It becomes very, a mechanical process. It alienates the human being. The human being loses his freedom. And also capitalism, produces lot of unnecessary goods or consumerist goods. In the consumerist culture, where the human beings lose the moral worth of the human relations, the moral worth of the work. So capitalism is also, creates a society where only a few individuals would, accumulate the property, accumulate the wealth, at the cost of, larger members of the society. So that is how they criticized, capitalism. In they strongly believed that capitalism and market economy would lead to, lot of inequalities. Only a few people benefit, or only a few people enjoy, but whereas majority of the people would suffer under capitalism. uh, and they believed in classless society. The society, the history of the society, is the history of, class war. That is what Karl Marx said. The history of man is the history of class war. How at different stages two opposing classes clashed and created a new system, a better system, to reach ultimately a capitalist system. In capitalist system, how the labor's exploitation takes place, and how it reaches to the peak, then the laboring class will unite and dislodge the capitalist class. And when capitalists are, abolished, or capitalism is abolished, or the bourgeoisie class is abolished, then there would be no longer, any class. The classless society would be established. The that Marx calls, communist state. A communist society to be propertyless, and thereby classless society will be established, and everybody would be equal. That is how, a kind of perfect equality would be established through classless society, by abolishing the bourgeoisie class or capitalist class. That is what, only by abolishing capitalist class or private property, then a classless society would be created and equality would be ensured. Uh, then uh, two kinds of equality. Marxism, talks about, two kinds of equality. The first equality was in communism. There are, to establish communism, or just before the establishing classless society and stateless society, there would be proletariat revolution. The proletariat revolution was a temporary phenomena, which was a process which takes place for some time, until the capitalist class is completely wiped out. During that temporary phase, during that temporary phase where there would be remnants of capitalism, would persist for some time till the classless society is established. So during that, dictatorship of the proletariat, during that period, the equality was from each according to his abilities, to each according to the amount of work performed. Here, abilities under socialism, abilities are, recognized. As per the ability, one would get the part of the wealth. But here, from socialism to, and communism, in between there was a temporary phase. There is a temporary phase. During that phase, the equality, to from each according to his abilities, to each according to the amount of work performed. Whoever performs work, more and more work, he would be given a little bit more, because that was a temporary phase. The ultimate aim is to achieve, complete equality in the communist society. In the communist society, the another equality is from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. In the communist society, everybody will be given the share of the wealth as per the needs, how much he needs. Only that much will be given. Nobody will be given more than what he needs. So that is how equality would be achieved. In the first instance, equality would be achieved based on the abilities. Whoever are having abilities, they are having, equal wealth. They possess equal wealth. So these two kinds of equalities were mentioned by Marxist thinking, or Marxist thinkers. uh, Labor is prime one. This is very important. With the abolition of division of labor, because the inequality is based on division of labor. Who are having, who are having the labor, from labor based on his mental capacity, and whoever performs by using his mental power would be, treated as more than equal, would be given so many privileges in terms of, more payment and more share of the wealth. But here, the abolition of the division of labor takes place. The distinction between mental and physical labor will also be disappeared, will also disappear, because the division of labor is the main reason for the division of the society into haves and have-nots. When this division of labor is abolished, everybody would perform, or the mental power and physical power would be brought on par with the same payment, or physical and mental labor will be treated equal. When they are treated equal, the labor will become not only a means of life, but as life's prime want. Every activity, or every laboring activity is, the prime need of every human being. Only through work, only through labor, human being realizes his potential, realizes his life. That is how the labor becomes a prime necessity of every human being. So when division of labor is abolished, and the labor becomes the prime want of a human being, then automatically equality would be realized. So that is how Marxist perspective looks at the concept of equality. And then a conclusion. Uh, See, the liberal theory seeks to promote, socio-economic equality by small and piecemeal adjustments within the capitalist system itself. So finally, we have to understand that liberal perspective looks at bringing about equality through piecemeal methods or through reforms. So by bringing about some changes, they try to reduce the inequality, and that is how the liberals view the equality is possible. But whereas uh, uh, Marxist ideology or Marxian ideology seeks to secure socio-economic equality through a wholesale replacement of the capitalist system, so by socialist system. Where socialist system here imply the socialization of the means of production and making work compulsory for all citizens. There would not be any difference between mental and physical activity. Both activities are treated as equal, and everybody would be forced to work. So this equality, which is imposed from above through an ideology like Marxian ideology, and there is a one-party system where Marxism is sought to be implemented or communism is sought to be achieved, and that system was experimented with in few countries, in Cuba, in China, and in Russia. And in Russia, it was in Russia that communist society was established through revolution, proletariat revolution that took place in 1917. And the private property was forcefully abolished, capitalism was abolished, and there was a lot of bloodshed, and communist party became so powerful and dictatorial, and it would decide the freedom and liberty or equality of the society. So that became so dictatorial, lot of bloodshed, there was a lot of bloodshed, and therefore many people thought that communism is creating a lot of violence, and when through violence the equality is sought to be established, it became so counterproductive, and many people suffered, many people lost their life. But whereas in capitalism or in market society, there is lot of inequality, and labor is exploited as as much as much possible, as much as possible. The labor is exploited as much as possible. So in capitalist society, you have worker will get alienated from his work, from his fellow human beings, and human relations are seen from the angle of economic needs. So when a human being is forced to work for his need, for the to satisfy his material needs, then the work will not give him real freedom or real liberty. So you have so many defects in capitalist system, but capitalist system is based on individual liberty, and that has become quite common these days. All the liberal democracies are based on capitalism and market economy. And after 1970s, the market economy and capitalism has has got upper hand over the socialistic or communistic thinking. But in between these two ideologies, we need to have equality and liberty. So we need to have proper balance. We have to see that labor would not suffer, and poor would not suffer, and at the same time, rich would not accumulate unnecessary wealth and unnecessary property. That is how we should make the social organization, and that is how we should have social organization, and we should have democracy functioning. Only then the concept of equality will have meaning. Thank you very much.